Good morning. Those of you who saw me yesterday will see I have no bow tie today, so I'm more subdued today because I thought I'll be slightly more in conformity, and in contrast to Professor yesterday, Dave, who came in multicolored hair and an outfit which I haven't seen for many years. I think he did a fantastic delivery, but his hairstyle was fantastic, so I thought I'll subdue myself today, all right? So, and the other thing is, since I've been here for 2 days, I always thought that flaps was something you got at B&Q, and when you get free flaps, as if you buy one, you get one for free. But anyway, now I've learned. And for a hypochondriac, I mean, my nervous system is cracking. I didn't sleep at all last night. I checked on the internet every conceivable disease. I went to the mirror and looked at myself, so it's quite frightening. But anyway, thank you again, Ian, for a wonderful conference and consultation, and brilliant erudite papers from everybody. And I've been asked to be a bit nasty with you guys, and I don't know what to say because you're all very nice. So, but I think that I have 2 core themes for our discussion today. And I think our doctor, who has, I think, just flown in from Kenya this morning, so I think his presentation was exceptional, but exceptionally exceptional, having just flown in. So can we give him a big round of applause because he just came in.
Go back to sleep now.
And I gave him another double shock because I said to him hello in Swahili, and he said, what? So we got off very good. I think you touched upon an issue which I think I would like us to open for discussion, if I may, which is, I mean, Nabil just now exposed the wonderful things we can look forward to, but the problem remains, it seems to me, in the third world particularly. I'm excluding Hong Kong and Singapore and rarefied worlds of Japan and so on. But if you look at Africa and South America, for example, how do you deal with the issue? And I would like to open it to all the panel, and then we'll have the... How do you deal with the issue of the student who comes in from Africa or the Middle East or South America, who comes to study in Europe, and he says to himself or herself, this is rather nice. I don't want to go back. And you touched upon it, Michel. Yeah. So can I throw it first to Nabil? How do you, as the ex-president, well, there you are, spotlight, well, you are a president. So let's go. How do you deal with this issue? How does one deal with the issue of the student who comes in to study, is an achiever, and says to himself or herself, why do I go back? How do you do that? Can you...
I don't think there's an answer to this. I'm glad you asked me because you obviously know I don't have an answer. I think that in selection of people, there is an attempt at doing that. See where they come from, what their support structure is, and whether they have a place to go back to, where they can actually satisfy the urge, or not the urge, the ambition, the aspiration that they have by coming to study. If you don't do that, you have less chance of succeeding. But if you have somebody who's got an institution to go back to hold a position, you have a little bit better chance of success, but it's not fault-proof.
Norman, can I just bring you in as the person who started this ball rolling? Any thoughts on that?
It's actually not a problem, is it? That's related only to developing countries, if I can use that term. I mean, it's interesting if you go to places like Australia, where there is a rural population that has to have medical care. There's the flight to the city, isn't there, all the time, which is in a microcosm in one country is the same problem, that people qualify and want to stay where the money is, I suppose, and where the medical experience is. So I know there are people here from Australia and New Zealand who may comment on it, but I mean, there are ways in which they, how can I put it, make it important that you do some work in an area which is disadvantaged before you're allowed to, as it were, come into the main area. But I have no other real insight onto it.
Mishak, what do you say?
You have to look at it in 3 aspects. One of the aspects why they actually don't come back is that when you have trained them so highly, they come back and they find that from the first day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, and beyond, they are doing nothing because first, the infrastructure is very bad. Number 2, now no one recognizes they have actually gone out there and trained as good specialists. Then they go back. I think one is to ensure that when you're training them, at the same time you're improving the infrastructure that is available. The other thing that I think we have to say is when we are training them, we have to ensure that, look, first of all, before they go for training, they have to understand that what are their actual needs in terms of why are they going to have that training. It is to give service to people that they are actually seeing who don't have the specialty. They need to go and train and come back. The other aspect, mainly on economy, we have to see how their salaries, their remunerations can be improved upon, because I think this is what takes them to the West, where you find that they earn more and they're able to do that, and provide also services for their families.
Right. I'll come back to you, Marius, but are there any questions? We do it like we did yesterday. Are there any questions from the audience on any of the topics raised, or on this uniquely complicated issue about the clever student who's here in the West? Any questions or any topics or any probingness? No, well.
Yeah. Hello, thank you for a fascinating discussion. I've had many thoughts about the issue of how you stop the brain drain, and what I've seen is that there's a lot of people now in the world who really have dual nationality, and it's more in Europe where people spend a long time in London for 3 months and then they go back to Greece or to Turkey or to... but I'm wondering whether part of the solution is to create a way where people can have dual nationality supported travel, so that each year people are having this a cultural exchange, a social exchange, and a medical exchange, so that the person who goes back to Africa or Asia doesn't feel isolated and lost with so that there's an establishment of a 20-year program where these things can be built. There isn't a bang, finished solution. But with air travel, with the financial ability we've got in the West, whether something along those lines is at least a start.
All right, thank you. Any more contributions from the floor? Yes. Yes, thank you, sir.
Originally, I'm from Hungary, and I don't know a solution, but I do know some example. In the 1960s, 70s, 80s, there was a policy of the communist states, all of the Eastern European communist states, to accept large amount of trainees from different third world countries, whether it's East Germany, Russia, Poland, Hungary. Nearly 90% went back, and I believe they received good training.
Thank you. Mario, would you like to add to that?
Well, as for us throughout Latin America, I think people that do not come back are today a minority in our specialty, different from basic areas that do basic research. I think that if the person has, if it's well chosen and has where to come back to, this will be even reduced. The problem we have today is with our residents that come from other countries within South America to Brazil, and some do not come back. But for residents from Brazil that come from up north and northeastern part of the countries, which are poor and which need those professionals, but they stay in the south, no matter what you do. So it's not an easy problem to...
All right. Well, I may come with... yes, we have a lady speaker. This is a major moment in history.
No, it's
well done.
Talk all the time.
I was crying for a lady interviewer yesterday. Thank you, ma'am.
I assure you I'm no lady. It's interesting that I think the aspect of legislating to stop people moving back, it even happens in this country. We all know that there are areas in the UK where it's very poorly populated for general dental practitioners because people want to stay where they train rather than go back to where they come from. And so the northwest and Cumbria, northwest of Scotland, exactly the same problem. So you can say it's the same issue, but just on a global nature. And legislating for it, I think every individual has their own choice and their choice to stay and move as they feel appropriate for them. And so I don't think you can make rules and regulations. You just hope that the economic situation in their own country or their own circumstances or their original country would improve to allow them to go back and practice a good practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? Yes, sir. Gentleman with the silver hair.
You're very
Silver
kind.
fox.
You're very kind.
Well, we share the same colour.
The
So
old silver fox, I get called.
Well,
Les Snape from New Zealand, and Andy Brown alluded to this, and I like your phrase, Anne. Do we expect people to stay where they train? Is that their expectation? No, we should train them where we want them to stay. And I believe very strongly that we've got to open up global training to the areas where the training is required, where the demand is, where the population resource is, so that we actually have people who want to stay in their own countries. Not to send them overseas. It's becoming so much more difficult for people from Australia and New Zealand who don't have a British passport and can't get a work visa to actually come here and even do 6 months. So we need more field training with experts like yourself in Australia, but ourselves going to those areas as well.
I like that. Can I just, before the next, can I just throw that so that we can debate it more? For example, a student comes to you, particularly, as you're a very eminent man, and I'm, you know,
you wouldn't get anything from me. I'm retired.
Well, you don't look retired, mate. Anyway, but the point about it is this: could you, for example, make a contract and say, okay, you've come from country X, all right? We will train you. You're going to pay for it, but the condition will be, at the end of your term, you will have to go back, and you guys, if you like him, must undertake not to take him or her up. Would you be willing to do that? Although it will infringe what our friend here said that about his individual right. I understand that. I just want to open it up for discussion.
Everybody wants to talk.
I'm not sure that I'm there to qualify to speak on that. I mean, I think Les is absolutely right. As a concept, you train people where they're needed.
Where they're needed.
Which is a lovely idea. And people from the International Association should be speaking here. I can see John William with his hand up, because there's no doubt about it. They're making moves to take training out to the areas where it's needed.
Right.
But at the moment, that's in its very early phases.
Right.
It's not what it's more didactic teaching than training.
Anybody,
John Williams, the man to speak.
I will, but anybody on the panel wants to add before I go to John Williams? No. Okay, John Williams, please, and then we'll go to...
Let John talk.
There was a gentleman at the back. Yes?
It's okay.
John is here.
I saw the man at the back. I'm refereeing. You sit down. Sorry, the gentleman... yeah, you, sir. The tall, handsome man. There you go.
Thank you for putting me before John Williams.
Well, I don't know who's John. I thought John Williams was a guitarist myself, but...
Just one of his many talents.
He used to be. He's now a hard man. And I'm shivering in my shoes. I think that Les Snape is absolutely right.
Can you speak up a bit?
Yeah. I think that Les Snape is absolutely right. We need to train people where they come from.
Right.
But the other incredibly important thing to say is they need to be trained in surgery that is appropriate for that area. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, last year I was very fortunate to go to Africa on a traveling scholarship. They have nothing in lots of places. Some of the big towns, some of the big cities do have facilities and excellent surgeons. But in a lot of places, there are no facilities for reconstruction. Mm-hmm. And our specialty in particular depends on gear. If you don't have that gear, you can't do the surgery. So there's no point training a very good surgeon to use the gear if it's not there.
That's Mishka. So thank you very much. Can we have John Williams now, please?
Yeah, do it. You go.
Yeah, a microphone. He needs a microphone.
He's got it in his hand.
John Williams. Just to bring an international flavour to this, the International Association, of which we are an affiliated national association, exists to try and deal with some of these problems. And if we just take East Africa, for the last 7 years, the International Association has been trying to help the problems that have been highlighted in East Africa. And when you go there, you find that you have an economic community which is very similar to the EC. And the whole of the attempts on the government level to coordinate the activities there mean that you have to take notice of what's happened in Europe to try and help East Africa. Now, the International Association believes that the right thing to do is to take education to the people. You train them in their own cultural and financial environment, and more importantly, their own clinical environment. Because what you see in East Africa is not what you see in Europe. So it's very important that you use the teachers that you can who are over there, and you supplement them by taking teachers from Europe or America or wherever it happens to be, Australia, New Zealand, into those countries to actually fill in the gaps. Now that's the educational side, and the International Association has facilitated that by financing coming together of the 23 trainees that exist in the whole of East Africa. That's the 9 countries within the economic community that is affiliated. And by bringing them together twice a year, we've actually not only got them together, so you have a group of people, which makes a cohort that is teachable, but you actually make good use of the teachers that you bring in. But as rightly said, the facilities may not exist. And in Dar es Salaam, there was a terrible lack of being able to get into the operating theatres. And the International Association raised enough money to build 2 dedicated operating theatres, 2 anaesthetic rooms, and a immediate recovery area to facilitate that continuing education and training. And I think that this is an example of just how big an effort it has to be and how financially draining it is, so that a national association like ours here can contribute by helping to fund our trainers who go out there to train, but it couldn't possibly take on the task of getting everybody together there, building facilities and so on, which can be done through the international level and the cooperation that exists there. So I think that a lot of the questions that are being answered, the International Association is trying to deal with. And I think that it just as behoves us as a national association to recognize our limitations, but to help where we can beyond that.
Thank you very much, John. Are there any more contributions on this topic? Because I've been asked to raise a slightly, Mr. Johnson. Great, thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to say something about the Cuban solution to this problem, because I visited Cuba earlier this year, and some of the panel may be aware of the Latin American School of Medicine, which is based in Cuba. And what they do is they invite doctors or would-be doctors, students, to go to Cuba, and they train them. And they train them as doctors. And they take people not only from Latin America, actually, but also from Africa. And the condition they take them on is that when they qualify, they go back to their place of origin. That's a stipulation. And so maybe if we're training people from abroad, we should stipulate that, you know, you can come and train here, but you must go back afterwards. But maybe that would be infringing civil rights, I don't know.
Well, it cuts both ways. Thank you for that contribution. I'm going to raise a slightly more sensitive issue, dare I say, which is a slightly wide surgical issue. And it's not going to be you, don't worry. Nabil's face dropped when I got close to him. No. Now, I'm going to ask this question generally of my panel, because one of my colleagues, it's not my field, who specializes in, dare I say, in this audience, don't lynch me, medical negligence. The question is, over the next 50 years, is there a likelihood that the cases that I'm told by my colleagues are about 20 to 30 a year of the needle left, the bit of cotton, whatever it's left in the stomach as you are opening somebody. Is there a way in which you collectively can think of reducing the likelihood of these mistakes taking place? Can I begin with you, sir?
I think you should ask in their own environment whether that is a problem.
Well, let me ask you first. But
I mean, obviously, there's all sorts of checks and balances now in British healthcare to make sure that wrong site and wrong side operations don't take place. And there's an awful lot of, everybody starts at the beginning, what's it called, where you have a checklist?
Checklist.
Like at the start of the operating theatre. Checklist. But, you know, we're human beings working in a flawed situation under pressure, and whether we can get rid of that completely is another thing altogether.
Right.
But I don't know whether that is a problem in other countries. Right. Certainly whether there is the medical legal aspect that is going to seek negligence.
Okay. Michel?
I think there are two things. In the practice, all the known standards must be followed. But what we are seeing in our own setups is that some of these requirements had an extra cost to already an existing situation whereby there isn't enough to use. And by trying to do that, you actually deprive a lot of services to people because you will say you will not do this because you don't have that. What we should be able to look at it, and I really strongly propose that when you train the people in the areas where they are born, where they live, and where they do that work, is to train them the basic standards of how to do clinical practice, both in the training and how you deal with the patient, so that you eliminate these kind of things. And I think we are seeing a reduction. What we should do is to ensure that whatever we do, whether it's in the rural areas, if you go to the rural areas, for example, is to make sure that you go with a team that you can go there and do the work that is supposed to be done without compromising any standards. But if we compromise standards by not making sure that we have the same way of training, then in that case, yes, the problem will be there because we're focusing on how to protect ourselves from these litigations, and we are forgetting the basic things that we need to do to take care of the patients.
Right. Mario, is that a problem in South America generally from your experience?
Well, I think you never get rid of all mistakes, but the really gross errors, at least in Latin America, what is needed is proper training and also proper quality control. Now, there's another thing that's happening in Latin America today, is the commercial side of it, where you see a poorly trained individual that takes a patient and uses a lot more plates and screws and materials and etc. than are needed for commercial reasons. So I think for us it can be dealt with proper training, and because the legislation is actually more or less there.
Nabil, from your experience in particular in Hong Kong, I think you're based, or Singapore, how prevalent is the problem that one reads about and knows about professionally exists of the needle left and all that? Is it a recurrent problem? Is it not very big, or is it
not very big? It's very minor. It does exist because it happens. But the checks and balances that Andy mentioned earlier are internationally, recognized things, developments in the field, which cut across not only the surgery operating room, the personnel, and the systems. They're adopted in the more and more developed places, and therefore it is one of many, many characteristics of standard. So depending on what place within the global standard of this practice a particular place is, you will see some or more or less of this, among other things. So the answer is, from my point of view, places where the standards is reasonably high is the same as any other place, and not much.
Right. Can I throw this topic in its wide implication? Yes, sir. It's nice. An enthusiastic pupil. I imagine when you were in class 5, you always had your hand up, sir.
It's not a great question.
Austin Smith, Sheffield, you might thank me, you might not. When things go wrong, it doesn't always mean necessarily that somebody's to blame. Yes. But the legal profession would try to persuade us that when something goes wrong, there's always someone to blame.
Or is it the insurance?
There isn't. Well, that's why I'm having a go at you, sir, if you don't mind. I think maybe you could speak to the panoply of legal companies, some of these clearly very commercial, that advertise that where there's blame, there's a claim, etc., and encourage people, sometimes on a very trivial basis, to sue, rather than accepting that sometimes things do go wrong and it's not necessarily the individual's blame. I do that really just to generate some controversy.
Yeah. No, but that's a very interesting topic. Just before somebody else speaks, in law generally, there is, I'm sure lots of you know, the law of tort, which is based on negligence and finding fault. In countries, I think in New Zealand and I think in Australia, they try to find no fault way in which somebody has been injured, you can deal with it. Does anybody else wish to contribute to this argument about negligence, how frequent it is? Do you encounter it a lot? Is it a nuisance? Would you like to shoot all lawyers? Or?
I don't think it's going to be something that's going to dominate the next 50 years. I mean, from what we've said before, the problems over the next 50 years are going to be at a much more basic level of organization of healthcare and funding and resourcing healthcare in these more disadvantaged countries.
I mean, I only raised it as a topic because in fact, I'm indebted to you because it seems to me we are living in an era and an age where we try to, everybody litigates. But the danger of that, we are all becoming overcautious. I mean, for example, when in my chambers now, as many of you would know, barristers are not allowed to have direct instructions from clients. It has to go through solicitors. And so but now, because of some civil service bond with this new government, so what we have to do, every time we write anything, we have to put in bold letters, there is a complaints procedure, and you can ring the Bar Council to complain. Obviously, I mean, if you just received 50 years for killing your grandmother, and you're going to think of ways to overturn the conviction. So you say, look, I've just seen the little line. I'm going to complain. And so, of course, you have a whole industry of complaints and so on. I just wanted to throw it to you guys. Does the issue of negligence, does it impede your way you do your practice? Does it make you less adventurous? Do you think twice? You say, it's a possible writ from Messrs. Grabbit and Sue. Does it slow you down? Does it? You should speak. Yes? Well, do I see a hand? Is there a hand?
I'll give you a hand if you want.
Here we are. Nabil.
Yes, please.
Yeah. I think that you make a distinction now that you elaborated like this between the developed countries and the less, so to do with standard. I think in the developed society, this is on the increase. And in answer to your question, I think that we come to accept this. We do practice, to some extent, defensive medicine, but we are conscious of this, and we try not to overdo it. We try to still win over the fear of lawyers on this issue. But we recognize it, we accept it, and we also accept the safety checks and all the prevention measures that are being given to us as a necessity. But in the less developed societies, there is no problem of suing, but the negligence may still be there because there are people who don't, either out of ignorance or out of impunity, there may be some negligence. And that's where education and training will come in. And ultimately, they will just crawl up towards where we are going.
Right.
Do you want me to say
Michel?
Let's look at what's actually happening in the developing countries, like in Africa. I think 90% of the patients, if something has been done with them, regardless whether a small bad thing was done, they will turn back and say thank you, because they were expecting to have, you have given them the help that they need that they didn't have. And in fact, what it is causing, that's actually challenging the professionals to say, look, if he's going to thank me when I've not done something good, I should then try to do the best that I can. However, what's happening in the West is actually spreading very fast to us, where the focus, which I think we believe might even reduce the number of specialists in those areas, practicing those areas, because they don't want to be involved in those kind of things. I think the West can play a major role to see how they can downgrade these other third parties, the contracts between the patient and the doctor. But I think one of these problems are coming in from other, third parties who want to influence this thing on here.